Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Raven's Perch. I'm your host, Dark Prince, and whether you're listening on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had a good Saturday and a good week. But before we get into today's episode, I just want to say thank you to everyone who listened to my introduction episode. It genuinely means a lot. Starting a podcast is something I'd wanted to do for a long time, but I kept putting it off because I thought I needed the perfect setup, the perfect microphone, or some kind of professional broadcasting voice. Turns out, all you really need was to stop making excuses and hit record. So here we are. Today's episode is all about how I ended up falling down the rabbit hole that is dark romance, and why I think Molly Gray characters have become some of the most memorable characters I've ever read. Now, before we start, just a quick disclaimer. Today's episode contains general discussion about books written for mature audiences. I'm not going to spoil any major plot points, but if you're planning to read any of the books I mention, it's always worth checking their content warnings beforehand. Right. Grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive into how I started my journey. It all started with ACOTAR, believe it or not. I didn't start with dark romance. Like a lot of readers, I actually started with A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I've seen the series everywhere, TikTok, Instagram, BookTok, friends talking about it. I felt like everyone had read it except me. So eventually I thought, fine, let's see what all the hype is about. And honestly, I understood it. The world building drew me in. The characters kept me reading, but what really stood out to me was that the characters weren't perfect. They made mistakes, they carried trauma, they changed throughout the story, they weren't simply good or evil. Looking back now, I think ACOTAR quietly introduced me to the kind of characters I'd end up loving the most. Characters who live in that grey area between hero and villain. All, at the time, I didn't realise it, but ACOTAR opened the door. Dark romance kicked off its hinges. Then I found Haunting Adeline. Now, okay, get comfortable, because this is a journey. If you spend any time on BookTok, you almost certainly have heard of Haunting Adeline. It's one of those books that people either absolutely love, or decide very quickly that it isn't for them. And honestly, both reactions are completely valid. When I first picked it up, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I heard people talking about Zade Meadows constantly. Some people loved him, some people hated him, some people couldn't stop arguing about him, so naturally I became curious. What I found wasn't just a romance, it was tension, psychological suspense, mystery, a constant feeling of what on earth is going to happen next. Whether you love Zade or not, you remember him. That's something I think is really interesting. Some fictional characters disappear from memory the moment you finish the book. Others stay with you for months. Zade is definitely one of those characters people continue talking about long after they've turned the last page. Now, another book I'm going to discuss is Lights Out. Not long afterwards, I picked up Lights Out. What surprised me about that book was its balance. It manages to mix darker themes with humour in a way that felt to anything I'd read before. It reminded me that dark romance doesn't have to be serious in every single word. Sometimes a witty conversation or a ridiculous moment actually makes the darker scenes hit even harder. That's something I really appreciated. Especially when he tries to put on a "I'm Batman" voice. Now, another book that I'm going to mention is called Little Stranger. Now, this book, when I discovered Little Stranger, out of the books I'm mentioning today, this one probably left me thinking the longest afterwards. What really stood out to me wasn't just the plot. It was the psychology behind the characters. Without spoiling anything, there are characters in this book who don't wear their emotions on the surface. You find yourself constantly trying to work out what they're thinking. Sometimes the quietest characters become the most unsettling. And I think that's because mystery keeps us engaged. When everything about a character is explained straight away, there's very little left for us to discover. Why do we love morally grey characters? So, this brings me back to today's main question. Why do we enjoy morally grey characters so much? For me, it's because they feel unpredictable. Perfect heroes are great, but generally know what they're going to do. They're going to save people, do the right thing, tell the truth. Whereas morally grey characters, not so much. One chapter, they're protecting someone. The next, they're making a decision that leaves you questioning everything. They keep you guessing. And I think that's why they're memorable. Now, I do think this is an important point to make. Enjoying these books doesn't mean we want these relationships in real life. Fiction gives us a safe place to explore situations we'd never want to experience ourselves. It's okay to enjoy complicated fictional characters while recognizing that real life is completely different. I think that's one of the reasons reading is so powerful. It lets us experience perspectives we'd never otherwise see. So, what comes next? Since discovering dark romance, my reading list has changed completely. I'm always looking for new recommendations, new authors, new stories, new characters that challenge expectations. So if you've got a favourite book, please let me know, whether it's fantasy, dark romance, thriller or horror. I'm always adding books to my ever-growing TBR. Although, I should probably stop buying books faster than I can actually read them. Nice little call out to myself there. I have a feeling I'm not the only person guilty of that. So, that's all for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about how I ended up discovering dark romance and why I think morally grey characters are some of the most fascinating people you'll find in fiction. If you have enjoyed today's conversation, I'd really appreciate it if you followed the podcast and shared it with someone who might enjoy it too. Next week, we're changing gears slightly. We'll be stepping away from the books for a little while and diving into another one of my passions, mask talk. We'll talk about what it is, why so many people love it, and how wearing a mask can become a form of creativity and self-expression. So, until then, take care of yourselves, keep reading, keep gaming, stay curious, and don't be afraid to explore stories that make you think. I'm Dark Prince, I've been your host of this podcast. You've been listening to The Raven's Perch, and I'll see you in the next episode.